Alright, one more for the road. We broke down the previous 5 factions. Now we get to break down the Praxis, which are my favorite faction, actually, in terms of what they're doing in the lore, and also in terms of just sort of how they are. They're kind of interesting and fun and flashy. The Praxis pursue knowledge for the sake of power in a very specific sense, and they are mages and sort of spellcasters. They are also fairly focused on divining certain things. There are a lot of time-based Praxis heroes as part of the Praxis Arcanum who work to sort of figure out what's going on in the future and either prevent it or change it in some way. So you'll see cards like Tessia Omen Shaper, and you have Diogo, of course, but you just have like a big old pile of interesting seers and strange people. Marison the Eldest is also amongst there, as well as Talir, who sees beyond, who has gotten a bit younger over the course of the game, it appears. Not really sure why that is. Might be related to time, might be related to art changes. So the Praxis Arcanum is led by Talir, who is Caiaphas's sister, and that is why she's considered a scion to the throne. The current plotline with Talir basically involves her looking for ways to prevent the encroachment of the Shadowlands, which is the outside area that is kind of like outside of reality and encroaching in on the reality of Myria. You can get to the Shadowlands through various different places, but the Shadowlands are starting to encroach in the events of the Dusk Road, which is why it's called the Dusk Road. So Talir's been like waking up sentinels. She's been messing around with waystones. She's gotten a little bit too involved with the waystones in particular, and that's caused some problems. But the Praxis are all about that kind of thing. They pursue knowledge with reckless aplomb, and they can pay the price for it because they are impulsive and very, very, just flashy. They make mistakes. They do things in a really sort of aggressive fashion. So yeah, I like the Praxis in general because they're all just glorious nerds. Like they are just dorks. Like, look at this guy. Is he not a dork? He's pretty amazing. But they pursue knowledge specifically so that they can summon big dinosaurs and make lots of flame and do all sorts of weird, ridiculous shenanigans. They have a style that's not quite like anything else in Eternal, and I'm a big fan of them because they are just interesting mages. They tend to hang out with big giant sentinels from unearthed ages, and yeah, I like these guys a lot. They're going to be more involved with the plot the more that Talir is involved with the plot, and with cards like End of Days coming out, showing Talir basically interfering with Eileen and Caleb, like we are probably going to see a little bit more of Talir and her faction as that goes on. So that's the Praxis. The other time faction with opposing colors is the Xenon. These guys are pretty scary. They also have kind of a garbage banner. Like, I think it's a diamond. I don't know. So the Xenon are, of all of the factions that focus on knowledge, the only faction that believes that knowledge should not be shared. They are secretive. They are generally pursuant of knowledge only to sort of keep it close to the vest and to do kind of some sort of unseen plot that nobody's really quite sure of the results of, but is probably not on the good side. They definitely seem to fall on the evil side of the equation. The Xenon are defined by both cultists and by the things that they worship, which are Radiance, the purple and yellow sort of weird power-y race of units that whose general purpose we do not know. Like, they are somewhat unknowable at the moment. It's hard to say whether or not their particular plans are coming to fruition in full, but it seems like with the fall of Caiaphas, something very bad has happened, and they are taking full advantage of it as they sort of, as the Shadowlands encroach and interesting things begin to happen. We've seen some interesting evolutions in Radiants over time. So the Radiants are divided into the Lumen and the Umbran, and these guys are always sort of inverted with each other. So if you look up an Umbran, you'll find a card like Umbran Reaper, the 5/1 that's got the flying and the entomb ability. And if you look up a Lumen, you'll find a card like the Lumen Defender, which is a 1/5 with deadly and some life gain abilities. And that's kind of like what you see. You've got the yellow ones and the purple ones. But in the later sets, particularly Omens, we've seen some cards that are both Lumen and Umbran. And it's not clear why this is happening, but Duskwalker in particular appears to be in some way drawing power from a Waystone. So that's something that we know about their secrets and what it is that they're up to. We also have the one-card World Joiner, which is a human Umbrid hybrid of some sort. And as to what that card is doing, nobody's really sure. Maybe that'll be explained at some point, but the Lumen and the Umbran are very, very secretive and certainly not necessarily going to be sharing anything. Vara is most closely associated with the Xenon at this point. She ventured off in search of her own fate. She hung out with Azindel, who is a clear Xenon cultist of some kind, or at least someone who is in some way affiliated with the Xenon. And since then, she's basically been trying to sort of ascertain what the cultist's secret is, and all of her adventures have led her deeper into the temple, where that knowledge may or may not consume her. We're certainly going to find out eventually. I'm interested to see. So that's the Xenon. Okay, so we've gone through the time. That means that we're on to Shadow and Justice, which means that we are into Argenport, which I hear has recently fallen. So, Argenport. What's going on with Argenport? Justice and Shadow is the symbol, and their banner at the moment is Roland's Fist, although I believe that's going to change with the standards and with other stuff, now that Roland is a little bit more on the deceased side. But what we have going on with the Argenport setup is actually the seat of power in Myria. Argenport is technologically, economically, and just in general the center of Myria for all intents and purposes. It is a port city, of course, but it is also the place where you see some of the most interesting technology out there, including the technology that makes the Valkyries, which are these sort of winged angel type creatures, or rather type people, that are in some way grafted mechanical wings by the Tinkers, who are a small race of sort of interesting looking mousy people. I think they're about 3 feet tall, which is always a little bit disconcerting. Yeah, like 2 to 3 feet tall overall. But the Tinker do a lot of the work on the Valkyries, and they are in some ways sort of the mechanics of Argenport. Argenport is the seat of power in Myria. It's where the Eternal Throne lies, inside the Spire district, and it has been upheld by Caiaphas for a very long time. Roland took the throne briefly to prevent the rebellion, and held the throne for a while making deals with the Cabal, which is a sort of crime family that exists in Argenport and is generally representing the shadow side of Argenport. Now, Argenport is all about justice, but because it is often related to shadow, it can be a pretty rough kind of justice. That's why Roland is an Iron Fist, and that's why the Valkyrie can often trend towards the shadow in their pursuit of justice. In particular, Mokto's Inquisition is a very significantly shadow-based Valkyrie set, and so the Valkyrie of Argenport are an important faction and one that we definitely see a lot of. In addition to the Valkyrie, we also have the Paladins of Argenport. They swear on the same oath book, actually, the Paladins' Oath Book. Both the Valkyrie and the Paladins swear to defend the city on this book, and in some way defend the city from harm, although some of them have broken with that, and with the sacking of the city by Aylin, there has been, some change of guard with the Crown Watch in general and the people defending the city. Other things that are related to Argenport in general, like this place is just sort of where all of the interesting stuff happens. Because it is the site of the throne, you will see a lot of interesting people here. But in general, it's home to sort of classy crime families. It's home to a series of sort of panopticon, very kind of scary justice enforcing Valkyries, and yeah, it's the seat of justice and the seat of power in Myria, and that's sort of where we're at with the city at the moment. We're going to be talking about it a little bit more as we talk about the Sky Crag, but first things first, I believe there's another justice faction to get to, and I just have to remember what it is. Ah yes, it's the Huru. Alright, the Huru wear many faces, and they have the coolest banners. The standard is actually pretty rad as well. So the Huru are a little bit secretive as well. It's a little hard to sort of understand what they're about, but they are another sort of mystical race, primal in nature, but also somewhat focused on order and on basically kind of teaching and creating structure. So they are raised by owls, which are of course wise and powerful, and these guys control a large variety of spies and students by the name of Unseen. The Meditative Stranger is probably sort of one of them, but doesn't qualify as an Unseen in this particular case. But the Unseen in general appear to be focused both on teaching and on learning, and also on using that power to do kind of things in the name of the owl. There's not a lot that has actually happened with the Huru in terms of what's going on. I believe Roland seeks them out for a pact of neutrality in the early tutorial. That might have changed, but overall they don't do a lot. And Eileen later on basically asks them for aid, and the aid of the Huru is something that she uses essentially to protect refugees from Argenport when the harsh rule comes down. She keeps people safe, and she uses the owls to basically help people out. So that's a thing that happens that endears her somewhat to Argenport's people, and might be more important in Fall of Argenport when she retakes the city. Beyond that, the owls have not had too much of a impact on the story, but still kind of an interesting faction. Alright, last one, the Sky Crag. Eileen's people. Alright, the Sky Crag live up in the mountains. They are a loosely knit tribe of scary folk for whom the strongest is the most important, and for whom chaos occasionally reigns. In addition to your standard tribal delightfulness, sometimes they band with the Yetis, who are mischievous and murderous, and that basically defines their two most commonly identifiable traits. If there's a Yeti, you're probably in some trouble, and it's probably going to be a delight for them. The Yeti are basically everywhere. We know that they have some relation to the giants, and indeed in the Jotun birth ritual we see a Yeti turn into a giant, so that is a thing that apparently can happen with the Yetis. But in general, they mostly run around speaking gibberish and throwing snowballs packed with rocks at people, or tripping horses, or doing any number of other things that all appear to be in the name of good fun, but are in every likelihood pretty deadly. Vadius Clanfather is the brother of Eileen and the leader of the Skycrag clans. Early in Omens of the Past, Eileen challenges him for control of the clans and uses that challenge to, well, basically beat and humiliate him. And then after that, she takes the clans and she leads them back to the city. In the time before Eternal starts, Eileen was a member of the Skycrag clans who actually led an assault on the city, and she was beaten by Caiaphas. And when that happened, I'm not sure if she was actually beaten, or rather if it was brought to a stalemate, but it got to the point where she agreed to a marriage to Caiaphas to create a peace between the two tribes and to sort of put her in a ruling position in Argenport. This is actually important for Caleb's story as well. Caleb is not a legitimate scion to the throne because he is like a clone of Caiaphas in some weird ways, but also because when Eileen married Caiaphas, Caleb, his firstborn son, was delegitimized, and it was basically said that once Caiaphas and Aylin had a baby, she would be, or he would be, the ruler of the throne. So Vara is the legitimate heir to the throne, and the person who probably should be taking over were she not wandering around with Xenon right now. So Aylin takes control of the clans. She comes back to Argenport, where these people now know her. They generally did not respect her before, but she appears to have wrought some measure of respect with some of them now. She beats the Crown Watch, she beats the Cabal, she beats the Valkyrie, she takes control of the city, and that's where we're at with Fall of Argenport, is that she has knocked over everyone who will stand in her way. With Roland dead at the hands of the Cabal, she's in control of the city, and now she's getting into a little bit of a fight with Caleb over something, which I think we're going to be exploring pretty soon in Fall of Argenport. But that's what's going on with the Sky Crag, as far as the clans go, as far as the tribes go, and as far as the Yeti go. So that's the 5 other factions, and that's basically where we're at with what's going on in the story right now. I hope this was helpful. This was a more casual thing. We might do a more official lore video breaking down the events of the Empty Throne as they happen and looking at the art that way, but this was just kind of a thing that I thought would be interesting as a filler episode, so we'll see how it goes, and if you guys like it, we'll put them both up. So cheers, everyone. Thank you for watching.